right, well, kia ora koutou. Welcome everybody to this call. It's good to see you all. And what we're going to do today is have a few updates from different people about what they're seeing in the sector. And in particular, we're really lucky we've got Emily and Rochelle are going to be sharing about this survey that's come out recently. And I mean, Emily Garden. They're going to be sharing about the community survey, which was released recently, and they've had a few engagement sessions, but I asked if they could present to this group, and they said that they could, so that was great. So we're going to hear from them just some high-level thoughts in terms of what were the outcomes from the survey, and then also, Rochelle, I think you can share a little bit about what does it mean going forward. And then Emily Mason from Impact Lab is going to be sharing just some thoughts on what she's seeing in the sector, conversations she's having. And yeah, so it's going to be really great to hear from those people. And then we'll do our usual thing of splitting into breakout rooms as a chance to engage and talk with people, hear from colleagues across the country about what they're seeing, and then we'll report back. So yeah, it's great to have you all join. And I think I might hand over to Emily Garden. I think you're going first. So if you could just outline to us, it'd be great if you could give us the overview in terms of the numbers of people who were involved and that type of thing, and explain to us what the results were. Thank you. Sure.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Emily Garden and I'm an associate at the Centre for Social Impact. Was Rochelle going to do a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Yeah, so I hand over to you.
All right, thanks, Emily. So kia ora tātou, I'm Rochelle Stewart-Allen from Hui E community Aotearoa. Talking previously, those on calls, about the nationwide survey that 4 partner organisations did, the Centre for Social Impact, Hui E community Aotearoa, Volunteering New Zealand, Philanthropy New Zealand. So we had more than 1,400 community organisations respond, and thank you to those who did that. That's really fantastic. It's really your stories that we are putting together and telling the story about. So we wanted to capture where our community and voluntary and tangata whenua organisations at. Pretty much it ended up roughly at the end of lockdown. And then where do they anticipate they will be in the next kind of 6 to 12 months. So we were wanting to get data to show both the challenges but also the incredible work and the amazing agility that the sector showed during that time. We have released the results on Monday this week. So we held a community workshop, webinar. Then we held a catch up with some government officials and then with funders this week as well to share the results. This sits alongside the Inspiring Communities research that was released last week, and some of you may have also been on that webinar. So their research and our research really sits well together. So maybe Emily, if I hand over to you to talk about the results, and then I can just kind of summarise with the next steps after that.
Great, thank you, Rochelle. I'm going to try and share my screen and hope that it works. Just trying to. Sorry, I've got 2 screens and I'm just.
I can see yours so that it's working from our end.
Are you seeing?
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing conclusions, so we've jumped right to the end.
Oh, sorry about this. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you for that introduction, Rochelle. And I think, as she said, it's important to note that we just had a huge volume of responses. It was really fantastic, the engagement with the survey. And myself, along with my colleague Adrian Field, had the real privilege of going through the huge volume of data, both qualitative and quantitative responses, over 1,400 eligible responses we had, meaning that respondents were able to speak on behalf of their organisation. So on that note, it feels important to say that it's really difficult to do justice to this huge volume of data in a sort of 7 to 10 minute presentation. Such a wide range of perspectives and experiences. So this should be considered a brief snapshot, sort of whistle-stop tour, really, of the flavour of the themes coming through. And I really encourage you to turn to the report for the more nuanced detail. Right, so as Rochelle mentioned, to acknowledge our project partners, the many representatives of the sector that gave their time to share their experiences, and also to acknowledge Foundation North for their funding of this work. And before I dive in, just a few notes about data collection. So it was an online survey conducted from May to June of this year, and it was distributed nationally via networks of project partners. It was a fairly even mix of open-ended and closed response questions. And we had 1,500 responses, of which there were just over 1,400 that we were able to analyse. And it's important to note that because this survey is self-selecting, it highlights issues sort of broadly faced by the sector, but we cannot claim that it's representative. That said, we were lucky enough to achieve a really good spread in terms of kind of nature of organisations and the geographic sort of location around Aotearoa. Okay. So in terms of giving a really brief overview, first, if there was one quote from the thousands and thousands of qualitative responses we received that really sums up the essence of our findings, I think it would be this: that we've never worked so hard with so little, challenging but hopefully with good outcomes. And this quote, and really the whole data set, emphasised the widespread impact of COVID-19 on the tangata whenua community and voluntary organisations, both throughout lockdown and beyond, but it also highlights the extent to which the sector stepped up, to which they adapted, innovated, and really moved with agility. And as this participant sort of sums up so succinctly, really, they really did do more with less. Yep, so in terms of the other sort of broad themes coming through, COVID challenged funding access, staff continuity and service delivery. But the sector really did rally, adapt, and as I said, do more with less. And the survey really highlighted some clear strengths that were coming through in organisations. And I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail, but broadly, they were unlocking this previously unknown capacity for flexibility and innovation, being responsive, nimble, adaptive, and an appreciation of technology, this incredible sort of great leap forward that many organisations experienced in terms of their capacity around ICT, and the immense value of working together. And this is just a really strong theme throughout the data. There's this huge appetite for collaboration that exists within the sector. So to jump sort of into the impacts, the financial impacts for organisations were really significant. And we asked participants to tell us how COVID had affected their funding or revenue for the 12 months ahead. And close to 3/4 of respondents experienced or were expecting a reduction in funding. And of those expecting a loss in revenue, 12% indicated a small loss, which is 0 to 9%, 19% a moderate reduction, that's 10 to 19, and the largest proportion, 27%, a large reduction, so that's 20 to 49%. And then there were 16% that experienced a very large reduction of 15%, 50% or more. 14% forecast no change, and there was a small group of 5% that expected or experienced an increase. We asked participants to indicate how much funding their organisation had in reserve to maintain staff and activity. And the good news is that most participating organisations did have at least some funds set aside to maintain continuity. 1/5 had sufficient funds for 2 to 3 months. A further 15% had sufficient funds to enable activity for 4 to 5, and just under half, at 46, had sufficient funds to last them for 6 months or more. And I don't have a slide for this, but we also asked about impacts on service delivery. And of that, 59% indicated they had to cut back on their service delivery due to COVID, and 17% had some increases. And we asked respondents to elaborate on the reason for these changes to service levels. And those that majority was service level reductions, talked in particular about the impact of social distancing restrictions, because face-to-face contact is so integral to the work that they do. And the other key thing coming through was the impact of reduced income. This was losing existing grants or contracts, and to a lesser extent, losing out on opportunities to fundraise. And these things affected the ability of groups to deliver their services. And a quote from one participant that I think really sums it up is, you know, less dollars means we had to let staff go. Therefore, we don't have the staff to do the same level of work. So again, that's sort of doing more with less, really. And when it came to that 17% that had increased service levels, this was overwhelmingly due to organisations stepping up to meet the surge in the level of need within their communities. And more often than not, this was attributed to higher levels of material hardship within communities. And as one participant said, you know, we went from helping 20 families to 80. So for some, it was just this huge, huge increase in demand. So we asked about challenges and opportunities, and key challenges identified were the ongoing challenge of meeting the needs of people that the sector supports. That accounted for 66%. People were able to list up to 5 challenges, and ensuring revenue to maintain viability. And that was the other really strong thing coming through. But despite the manifest challenges, there were significant emerging opportunities for organisations. And the key one there was a stronger sense of community and common values within the sector. And this is just such a strong theme that came through throughout responses to questions. And it's sort of connected to that, sort of the third point down as well, around working closely with other organisations. So that theme of collaboration and really just the value of collaboration coming through. And again, we've got the new ways of connecting people. So a lot of that was around sort of enhanced digital connectivity. And other themes coming through in terms of opportunities were a greater appreciation for organisations' work, feeling really valued, improved working options for staff, and the ability to sort of be agile and move quickly. So in terms of key priorities and concerns on the right, we asked respondents to indicate their key priorities and concerns. And for this slide, I've really left the participants to speak for themselves. But the key themes that were coming through are dealing with financial uncertainty. Kind of unsurprisingly, was a really prominent concern. It was raised by 43% of participants. And this included concern about the loss of financial resources, or the sense that they were really kind of insecure. And the loss of particular income streams, but also sort of real challenges to service delivery and viability that came with that. 23% of organisations were focused on continuing to provide impactful services that meet the needs of clients. They're quite similar themes as the challenges and opportunities there. And there was a sense that they were really facing this challenge, I suppose, of balancing maintaining existing obligations with meeting this increased demand for services whilst working in this climate of reduced financial and human resources, and trying to sort of hold all those sort of demands and challenges at once. 16% were focused on resuming business as usual activities and sort of pre-COVID levels of functioning as quickly as possible. But again, they were trying to get back to that place while sort of adapting in order to meet the obligations of operating within this sort of new normal of COVID. The safety and support of team members, along with challenges associated with recruiting and retaining staff and volunteers, were concerns for 11% of participants. And then finally, just over 3% were sort of looking forward towards the future. And that quote, you know, around maintaining momentum and taking the best of lockdown to see how we can be leaner and smarter, sort of really sums up that sense of a desire to explore how we can build back better. And a big part of that is leveraging off that huge amount of collaboration that took place. And other themes that came through were this sense that the sector's underestimated and overlooked, challenges relating to working digitally, such as the huge financial investment that was required to sort of upgrade in terms of ICT capacity, and there were real worries about inequities in access to technology around for clients as well. So in terms of adapting, to COVID, there was this huge amount of agility and innovation in how organisations adapted to the challenges of COVID. And over half pivoted to offer online services, and over a third were seeking new funding sources to maintain continuity in the face of reduced income. And there were also notable shifts in staffing and volunteering. 14% had to reduce the numbers of volunteers, 12% reduced staff wages and salaries, 9% reduced staff numbers, and 12% increased volunteer numbers. And there were many new ways of working identified. And the most prominent new method of working mentioned by participants was, perhaps unsurprisingly, using online meeting software, software such as Zoom, which was seen to be just transformative for some organisations. It was taken up by 1/3 of participants. Around 1/5 used online platforms to modify their service delivery, and many participants were really surprised by the effectiveness of remote delivery and the extent to which it was embraced by clients, stakeholders and members alike. Some plan to continue offering remote delivery options for clients, but quite a few of these people noted the increased workload and cost associated with offering these multiple modes of delivery. So there were real challenges there. But organisations were really willing to continue to offer that if it was what worked best for their clients. 1/5 of participants had explored remote working, and many noted they'd learnt that it wasn't necessary to share an office to work collaboratively and effectively. And they noted huge benefits, particularly in terms of staff wellbeing, for offering them this increased flexibility. And finally, once again, that value of partnership working came through really strongly here. And in terms of new ways of working, participants indicated that COVID had really been this powerful catalyst for building relationships and collaborating across the sector as organisations really work to support one another and share their resources and knowledge. We're nearly there. So in terms of sort of shaping the future and looking ahead, we asked participants to rate on a 1 to 6 scale how pessimistic or optimistic they were that their organisation would still be operating in 6 months' time. So they were rating it from very pessimistic to very confident. And I think that this really speaks to the resilience of the sector, the fact that 2/3 were very confident that their organisation would still be around in 6 months' time. Only 4% rated very pessimistic, and a further 3% gave a rating of 2. So despite these many challenges, this huge optimistic and sort of sense of being up for it to meet those challenges. We also asked about what the most needed areas of support, what they felt the sector needed in terms of support, and 57% there felt they needed more support with fundraising, marketing and communications at 45%. Support with digital technology was a big theme, both in terms of actual hardware, but also in terms of sort of training and capacity building, in terms of making best use of that technology. Innovation and strategic advice, grant writing, and there was from groups of volunteers a real sense of needing support with recruitment. Participants were also asked to identify what they felt was needed to strengthen the sector going forward. And once again, this huge appetite for collaboration comes through here. And there was this sense, sort of in the qualitative data, that for some participants knew this was really important. Many had seen the benefits of collaboration during COVID. So sort of yet at the same time, there was this desire for support in this area in terms of the availability of spaces for collaboration, relationship brokering, and so on. And as one participant put it, we need collaboration, but I know, there's no playbook for this. I thought that was quite a powerful quote. And other key areas included funding to cover sort of salaries and other operational costs, and sector-wide leadership to provide voice and influence. Okay, so we asked about key lessons from COVID. And I want to note here that this graph is a top 6 of a really long list with many wide-ranging perspectives coming through. So again, encourage you to turn to the report for the more nuanced data there, particularly to this question, just a really broad range of learning. The importance of responsiveness and flexibility came through for 12% of organisations. And some felt that the rapidly changing environment had unlocked a previously unknown capacity for agility and innovation. And they talked about learning, how quickly they could adapt and deliver new initiatives and respond to this evolving need. They talked about learning about the value of being really positive, sort of up for it, and being willing to roll with the punches and not afraid to test new ideas and learn from those outcomes and sort of adapt accordingly. The value of digital connectivity came through, and this appreciation of technology as a powerful tool, offering new ways to connect and communicate. And as I said before, they really talked about the sense of having technological advancement sort of forced upon them and how this resulted in this great leap forward, as one person put it, in terms of skills and confidence. And there was real excitement for the potential for alternative ways of working that this new capacity opened up. 10% of participants felt that COVID had revealed strengths and capabilities of teams. And they described learning that their teams were, really fit for purpose, and that COVID had highlighted the commitment of staff and strong sense of mission within the organisation. Once again, relationship building and collaboration featured strongly for 6% of participants, again highlighting that huge appetite for collaboration, which was seen by many as being really key to the sector's sustainability. And there was a sense, I suppose, that that the pandemic had showed how quickly people can come together to share achieve a shared objective. And there was this real desire to build on that work. And finally, 5% talked about learning of the need to be prepared for any possibilities. And they noted the importance of things like conservative financial management and comprehensive planning that includes worst case scenarios. And most of these people were reflecting on the need for sort of further work, I suppose, in this area for their organisations. And yep, so in terms, just to add to this, in terms of where to from here, we asked people if they'd be willing for their responses to be shared more widely. And I think it's really fantastic that 96% of the people that responded to the survey gave us permission to do so. So our plan is, once the qualitative data has been anonymised, is to make the data open source on the community research platform. And also to know over 3/4 of the respondents were willing to be surveyed again should the opportunity come up. And the conclusions, just to sort of recap, so while many organisations took a hit, they really did mobilise and move with agility. The effective leadership and fast action by government was matched by people and communities across the country. And that strong sense of togetherness, digital connectivity, and revitalised sense of values and purpose really resulted in this renewed sense of vibrancy. And I think in terms of kind of next steps, I'm going to hand back to you, Rochelle, to kind of sum that up. Thank you. Stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Emily. So if you're interested in accessing the report and all the results, you can go to the Hui E website. I'll put it in the chat, and also we'll give it to Stephen so he can share out with his email. That'll go out with the update. So on there you'll find the full report, a summary report, an infographic, the more extended slides for the results, including some graphs, and then also the recording from the community session that we ran on Monday. So I'll pop that in the chat in a moment, and then you can also take a look at that. So there's 3 steps going forward. The first is, as Emily already mentioned, we're looking to anonymise and open up the data set so that other organisations can use that data and in whatever way that they need. So subsectors, regional, particular ethnicities, whatever level of information they needed. On our government workshop on Monday. They were particularly interested in that as well. So we also have a series of recommendations which you'll hear on the end of the recording that we made on Monday. So VNZ and Hui E are running a series of recommendations of next steps. So this fantastic data that we've got, which has given so much insight into the needs of the sector and the asks, as well as what's gone really well. There's a series of recommendations, and we're just in the process of getting those written up, and we'll be adding them to that web page as well on the Hui E website coming up. But you can listen to them and see the PowerPoint presentation slides on that recording of the community session. We did put a call out, and we'll put that call out today as well, of people within the sector that are interested in helping to roll out those recommendations. And we have our first meeting next Monday at 11 AM on Zoom. So I will drop also the email address to contact if you want to participate in that. I know some of you on the call have already enrolled in that. So the idea is just to have an initial conversation about these recommendations, determine if the people from the sector feel like they're the right steps going forward, and then look at how we can collectively work on those recommendations together. And then finally, we put the call out for regional workshops. So we know that there's a lot of interest across different areas in New Zealand for regional data to be analysed. So that's outside the scope of the work that CSI has done. So we already have interest, and thanks for those who put their hand up on Monday, for Auckland, Hamilton, and Auckland, Waikato and Canterbury. So we're starting to explore running workshops there, and we've had some community organisations put their hand up keen to be involved in that. So that would sit with a regional analysis, and then we would do a workshop on that data. So I will put my email address, and you can feel free to contact me if you're interested in that as well. So that's all from us. It was a really huge project, but we are really wrapped with how many organisations participated. And also we're really interested in keeping these stories alive. There was so much richness that came out of the data that you shared with us, so we're wanting to take that forward. We'll do the regional workshops, the recommendations. We're hoping that once the data set's opened, other organisations will start to do their own analysis, so that we really create a better visibility. That was one of the biggest things that came out of people's comments on strengthening the sector, was about more visibility about the amazing work that we do. So thanks very much. Back to you, Stephen.
Great, thank you very much. That was really good, excellent from both of you. I appreciate that summarising, and we will put links in when I send out the email afterwards to the summaries and the full report and things. It's quite interesting because I reflect remembering a couple, actually only weeks ago in some ways, recently, saying there's this thing that's coming up, ask people to fill it in, and here we are today saying here's the results. So it's quite fun to have been seeing the process right from the beginning to what we have today. So I'm sure we'll all be interested to read it in more detail and share it with our network. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn now, shift and focus a little bit to Emily Mason. So Emily, I'm really interested in the work that you're doing with Impact Lab, and just the analytical approach there of thinking about, well, what's the true impact of some of the work that's going on in the community. And so I'd be keen just for your take on what you're seeing. I think it's helpful. Part of the purpose of these calls is to hear different perspectives, because often we end up in silos and we talk with people who are seeing what we're seeing. So just having outside voices, different people's perspectives is really helpful. So over to you to share a little bit about whatever you want, really.
Thank you, Stephen. Kia ora koutou, or Emily Mason, aho. My name's Emily Mason, and I am co-founder at an organisation called Impact Lab. I have been calling myself a recovering public servant, but I've been out of central government for a couple of years now. But as far as my background goes, establishing both policy and analytical teams and using governance big data sets to understand, to get a better view from Wellington's perspective on what is actually happening for people around the country. So I actually thought I would talk today a little bit about what I'm seeing and what we do at Impact Lab, but the fit is really nice between the two, because I thought I'd talk about local data and national data and how you put them together to see impact, or how I see that. So actually the introduction from Emily and Rochelle is perfect. Thank you. So Impact Lab, can you have a little bit of a show of hands or the wave to anyone who's heard of Impact Lab? Okay, cool, a few of you. So we were set up to, because Ian and my co-founders believed that there were tools that were available and data sets that were available to really understand the impact of what was happening in the social sector and to value that in a consistent and comparable way that hadn't happened before. And what we've found over, we've been going about 18 months now, is that there are two sources of demand for that information, from both funders and service providers. Then you're keen to understand impact from 2 points of view. One is from a continuous improvement perspective. So how do we know we're having the biggest impact and how do we improve our impact? And the second one is, what is the value of what we do today on the future of people's lives, and how do we communicate that with funders, whether that be government or others, to show that we're what we will return for the investment that they give us. So we take quite a technocratic approach in terms of the background. There's a lot of science, maths, economic theory behind what we do, but in how we interact with community is that we listen very, very carefully to what you do and how you do it to better understand the impact. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how can you understand the value in a comparable way of work that you do in organisations that's highly localised and highly committed to the people that you work with in the communities that you work with in those communities, in a system that's complex where one thing impacts on another. How do you entangle all of those, and actually do you want to, because you're actually looking to work together. We're hearing a lot about collaboration, particularly at the moment, to move from where impact can feel random to where impact can be delivered collaboratively to where it can be delivered collectively. And so how do we use the tools we've got to move from random impact through to collaborative impact through to collective impact, where you're really, usually I have a slide that has arrows firing all over the place, and for random, arrows firing at a target for collaborative, and arrows all heading in the same direction like a flock of birds for collective impact. And how do we use both national and local level data to do that? So I, like the ladies who just spoke, I would say that it really resonated with me that many organisations are having to do more with less, and really being asked some tough questions in terms of applying for funding and not having it's tricky. The whole sector's under pressure, I guess. More need, tighter funding, and actually not even just tighter funding, people slowing down in their decision making just to see how things are going to play out a little bit. So what do we do now that doesn't cost a lot, but communicates with funders and gives them confidence that you are investing their money, hard-earned, in the right things? So in terms of what you can see nationally, there are national level data sets around the size of the opportunity. So how many people in your community will benefit from the support that you can give them? And you can do that in more or less sophisticated ways. And the Impact Lab Good Measure tool will also put a value to that in terms of dollar terms. When you create a change in someone's life, what's the value that's released to New Zealand that can then be reinvested in creating even more good? So those are the two national level parts in terms of national level data to understand impact. And then the local level data, my thinking around this at the moment goes something like, start by measuring what you do. So the question to answer is, what are we doing at the moment? How many people do we serve? How much does it cost per person? And can we differentiate by different groups? So this will help give funders confidence that you understand who you are working with, what it costs to serve them, and I would add, why are we here? So what are the aims of our organisation? And if you have opportunities to think about in a theoretical sense, well, in an academic sense, what we'd call your theory of change, and CSI are great on this kind of work as well, along with others. What is your theory of change that links your activities to the outcomes that you want to see for people? How many of those people and what does it cost? Those are the things you can really articulate to give funders confidence that you will spend their money wisely to improve what you do. Once you can understand and articulate, Catherine's shaking her head. Do you have a question, Catherine? Okay. Once you can articulate that, measure what you learn would be the next step in the way that we think about the world. So what is the progress that you're making? What affects how many people complete your program or your initiative or your whatever service you're providing? What can we learn about what to do next? And can you see a change in the cost that is to deliver per person over time? And can you link that back to the benefits that you're seeing? Because then the final question actually is, after you understand what are you doing and can articulate that really succinctly with what are you learning, you can then say, and what are the high level shifts that we are seeing? And this is, at this point, you might think about a more substantive evaluation, or in terms of what Impact Lab does, an evaluation of what you do. And at this point, it's what are the shifts that you're seeing for your community, for your region, for New Zealand, because of the work that you are doing, and you can start to think about your social return on investment. But that's the third part, rather than where you start. And I think my reflection over the last kind of couple of years is that people have leaped to, oh, we need a return on social return on investment, or we need a figure, and it's a complicated, long, complicated piece of research. Whereas if you can start with what are we doing, who are we working with, how much does it cost us, and how will we improve next, then you can add that and what's the value of that. That's my 5 minutes. Questions, thoughts, wonderings?
Yeah, no, it's great. I think this is part of the call for the sector, is to be able to articulate the impact. And what you've outlined is really a good framework or a lens to start thinking about some of these things. So thank you.
Yeah, so 3 questions. What do you do? Why do you do it? How do you do it? And then you can start to add in what's it worth after that, but you can't get to what's it worth until you can answer those 3 questions.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, does anybody have a question? That's fine. I think it's interesting to me because when you start, because we've chatted about this before, Emily, you know, if you talk about $1 and think about, okay, this dollar will have X amount of impact, and then actually trying to measure not just that the dollar went out to an organization and it was used for some purpose, and there was a report that came back that said we built this or we did this course or whatever, but then actually the next level is saying what was the flow on impact, that's the impacts that are difficult to measure. But
that's right. So our methodology uses that local level expertise and national level data to do that, right? So what are the outcomes that you care about? When you change an outcome for a given population, what's that worth to New Zealand? And we do that using a whole lot of econometric research and also publicly available values through the Treasury and others. And we combine that with the literature, a lot from CSI actually, about effectiveness and how effective you can be. And then we combine that with who do you work with, how many people do you work with, and what does it cost? And the maths, the algorithm that creates then says, and this is the value that your organisation returns to New Zealand. But I don't want to, I mean, you know, I'm totally passionate about what we do and I can talk about it a long time. You don't have to start there. You can start with the first parts.
No, that's
Helen, can you see any dangers in this approach of oversimplifying impact to a fiscal value? 100%, Helen. No one ever comes to us because they want to know the numbers first. They always come because they have a passion for what they do, and they really see that they're making change in a community, and we're only part of that answer. Impact Lab was established because the quantitative part of the answer about what is the impact that you have in a comparable way didn't exist. It's not a replacement for what's already out there.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That's really good. And in the follow-up email, we'll put a little link and people can check out more information. And yeah, it's just—
Thank you very much.
Oh, no worries. Like I said, it's just good to get these different perspectives. And I remind people of this again, but if you come across interesting things to share, feel free to send them through, because the email list, it goes out to quite a few people now. I think the latest I saw was about 225. And I know many people can't attend the calls because of various things, but I get quite a few emails from people saying, thanks for that summary. So it's a good way to be— the aim of this call is actually to be a cross-sector connecting, so that it's funders, it's charities, it's government, it's professionals, it's a bit of everybody. So yeah.
Can I just say one thank you, actually, while I've got this audience? So as a public servant, I think over 20 years, I probably went into 5 NGOs across the whole time that I was working in policy. And in the last year, I think I've been into 50. And it's been the absolutely most soul-filling thing that I've ever done. So I really thank all of the community for inviting Impact Lab in to work with them, and your kind of generosity in the way that you work. It's been really, really humbling. So thank you.
That's fine. Great. All right. Well, what we're going to do now is turn to have a little breakout time. It's a little bit later than normal, so we'll just keep it quite short. But what I'll do is send you to 3 different breakout rooms. So this is a chance to just share some things that you're seeing. And because a bigger room, it's quite difficult for everybody to have a voice. But by sending you to breakouts, you can report back some of the key things. So I'll do that now, and I know some of you will drop off, and that's cool. But if one of you could keep notes of what you talk about, and then report back, and that way the rest of the people can also read those later. So have a nice chat with your rooms. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. It's good to see you all. So normally there'd be a bit longer, but I'm just conscious of time and I just wanted to compress it a bit. So if we could go around the traps and hear from each group, if you could just report back some of the key things that you're seeing or you talked about, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm happy to start. 3 people had a chance to share, which was really useful. We talked on the back of the presentation of the CSI, Hui E and others report. We talked about a strong sense of responsibility from the team to action the recommendations now that they have the results and they have the insights. Also leveraging, the Shaping the Future report from Inspiring Communities at the same time, and talked a lot about the need for strong regional local approaches, which for me resonate a lot because it's a place-based approach, so really important to have these nationwide insights to, I think, inform a place-based contextualized approach to recovery and regeneration. And that was echoed, I think, by someone else, Karen, who shared some sad news of her community enterprise closing down this week. And the point Karen made about small towns just don't have the scale, they don't reach the scale to actually survive in such a context. So how would that look if small could join together? And I think that brings us to the definition of the place. What is the place? What is the community? Where are the resources and the opportunity for collaborations and partnership to thrive and to succeed? Dennis talked a bit about interesting crossover, but also divergence in data and experiences through such a complicated, context of crisis, and the importance also to take what people say with a grain of salt, and having this ability to translate what we hear, which, yeah, is a challenge for sure.
Great. Thank you very much. That's really good. And if I can ask those who report back, if you can just put in like a couple sentences in an email to me, that would be really helpful, because then I don't have to watch the videos and summarize it again. All right, is there another group that wants to share?
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. We ended up talking a bit about both of the presentations that we heard today. And it was quite an interesting conversation. I think there was a bit of disappointment, a sort of disappointment feeling in the group, to be honest. Sometimes I think about the over aggregation of data and the oversimplification of things. There was a little bit of frustration that often the most exciting pieces of data are the outliers. What are the kind of interesting points of difference, the innovations on the fringe, not just what the standard service provision opinion was. So we thought that we would kind of just air that interesting feedback. So we're interested in what's going well, but also what are the really hard things that need to change that were really highlighted by COVID. Like, it's just a bit aggregated and a little bit soft, I think, for some of us.
Oh, that's helpful. I'm sure Chloe and Emily are taking notes, and it's good. It's really good. I thought one of the things in the presentation that came across well that I appreciated, Emily, was you put in some quotes, some real life quotes, and I thought that helped because you're right, 1,400 responses, and the statistics are what they are. But if you can somehow personalize it and say, well, actually, this was the key point, and I thought, yeah, but I hear what you're saying as well. I'm sure there's no easy answer, but thank you for highlighting it. That's helpful. And how about the last group? Did you have any thoughts? Anyone volunteering from the last group?
Yeah, I'll volunteer. We talked about the report a little bit, and the need to do that personalisation process, which is taking it out of being the survey people, the data people use into what actually the respondents were saying. So that was part of what we talked about. We also talked about how community sector worked with the wage subsidy and the loan scheme that came out of the open process, and how that was not an easy thing for people to pick up and deal with, and needing to work with that. And I think we had quite a short trip. Actually, I can't remember what else we talked about now. That was pretty much it, I think. Rochelle or Emily, you might want to add.
I think we just also talked about regional responses as well. Because Andrew is based in Taupo, so we talked about some of the things that he was seeing on the ground there with some of the organisations. And we also talked about this potential that's been indicated by the government this week, that it's not a case of if but when, in preparation for another wave, and how organisations might respond and or be prepared for that.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I realized it was a short time, but I just thought, given busy schedules and we're coming up to 1, it was good to keep it shorter today. But thank you, everybody, for joining, and I'll send around a link so you may know people who would appreciate seeing the content. You can send that on. And if you do know of things coming up that others would be interested in, just drop me a line and I can make sure to share that as well. As I say, the purpose here is to get some cross-sector perspectives and to have conversations and to do that using technology. So thanks everybody for joining, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks.